Have you ever wondered why we feel this almost irresistible urge to stop kids from doing dangerous things? I mean, is it really just about their safety, or could there be something deeper, maybe even something a little darker going on? Okay, let's really dive into that question, and we're going to use a simple, everyday scene as our starting point.
So take a look at this kid. You can just feel the energy, right? The focus. He's up there at the top of a skate park, about to try a trick that takes speed, it takes balance, and yeah, there's a very real chance he's going to get hurt. But nobody's making him do it. He is choosing this challenge.
So our first instinct as adults, as parents, it might be to yell, "Hey, stop, you'll get hurt." But the source material we're digging into today asks us to just pause, to think about that impulse. What if stopping him is actually the absolute wrong thing to do?
To get our heads around why we shouldn't stop him, we really need to reframe what's actually happening here. This isn't just about chasing danger for the thrill of it. As our source material argues, this is about a fundamental human drive, the need to achieve mastery.
This quote right here, it directly challenges one of our most basic assumptions. We tend to think that the #1 human motivation is to be safe, to minimize risk at all costs. But when you actually watch skateboarders, or kids climbing trees, or doing any number of daring things, you see a totally different story. They are not trying to be safe. They're trying to be good at something.
And this is where the whole script gets flipped. See, real safety, true safety, it doesn't come from avoiding risk. It comes from facing risk head-on and developing the skill, the competence to handle it. By taking on the danger of that handrail, these kids are building the very skills that will actually keep them safe in a world that is, let's face it, inherently unpredictable and dangerous. So, this leads to a pretty powerful critique of our modern obsession with safety. What really happens when we try to engineer every last bit of risk out of the world? The author gives this fantastic example from Toronto. After some new laws came in, all the city's playground equipment was suddenly declared too dangerous, and they just ripped it all out. So, what did the kids do? They didn't just sit around safely in the dirt. No way. The more adventurous ones started climbing on the school roof. They just found a new, and, you could argue, a much more dangerous challenge. This brings us to a really key concept: risk optimization. It turns out we aren't risk minimizers, we are risk optimizers. We instinctively look for a level of challenge that pushes us, that lives right there on the edge between what we can do and the chaos of the unknown, because that's where we grow, that's where we feel alive. And this is the official response to that natural drive. Instead of building a skate park, the local university just installed these ugly metal brackets to stop the kids. The author argues that the pure ugliness of this solution tells you everything you need to know. It's not just about protecting property. It gives off this vibe of resentment, this sort of prison yard look that screams, "We don't trust you. We don't like what you're doing."
That observation about resentment, it opens the door to a much deeper psychological question. Why would anyone be motivated by such a negative, ugly impulse? What is really going on beneath the surface of just keeping people safe? To understand this, the author introduces a really powerful concept from the philosopher Nietzsche: ressentiment. Now, this isn't just simple resentment. Oh no, it's a poisonous, creative kind of bitterness. It's the feeling the powerless have towards the powerful, that the failed have towards the successful. And it often disguises itself as virtue, cloaking its desire for revenge in the language of equality or safety. So how do we even spot this hidden motive? The author offers up what he calls a psychoanalytic scalpel, a principle from Carl Jung. It's simple. If someone's stated reasons just don't make sense, stop listening to their words. Instead, look at the result of their actions, because the consequence often reveals the true unconscious motivation. All right, let's apply that scalpel to the skate stoppers. The stated motive is what? Safety, property protection? But what's the actual consequence? Well, it stops courageous young men from developing competence, and it makes public space ugly and oppressive. So using Jung's logic, the author makes a pretty chilling suggestion. Maybe that was the real goal all along: to punish success, to stifle courage, and to tear down beauty. Now, this spirit of resentment, this desire to punish competence, it isn't just some abstract idea. The author argues it's a very real and destructive force. And to see just how destructive it can be, he shares the tragic story of his childhood friend Chris.
So the crucial point here is how this toxic mindset took root and just grew. It all started with guilt. Chris felt he couldn't fight back against bullies because of, historical injustices. This then turned into a hatred for his own masculine nature, for ambition, for success itself, and eventually that resentment just curdled into a desire to destroy, to break mirrors on cars, to sabotage his own life, and ultimately to direct that rage at others and himself.
This destructive spirit isn't just confined to one troubled person, though. The author sees echoes of it all over our mainstream culture. He describes a professor at a TEDx talk who, filled with this sense of humanity's failings, told a room full of students that the most ethical thing they could do was to have fewer children. Now, it's presented as this noble sacrifice for the planet, but the author asks, is it actually animated by the same anti-human resentment that destroyed his friend?
Okay, so let's bring all of this back to the present day. What happens when this spirit of resentment, this over-the-top emphasis on safety, and this suspicion of masculine competence gets baked right into our major institutions, like our schools?
Well, the real-world data shows a pretty clear trend. For some time now, girls have been outperforming boys in school. Women now make up the majority of students in over 2/3 of all university disciplines. And we're not talking about a small gap here. This is a major societal shift.
The author suggests a few reasons for this growing gap. Schools, which tend to value obedience, often end up punishing the very traits of independence and disagreeableness that are more common in boys. And as education becomes less competitive and more cooperative, boys might be checking out. On top of that, in some fields, especially in the humanities, there's an ideological climate that is, frankly, openly hostile to men and masculinity.
In fields that are really people-focused, like healthcare, psychology, and education, the imbalance is even more stark. Women make up nearly 80% of the students. 80%! The author asks a tough question. If this trend keeps up, what will our universities, and by extension our society, even look like in another 15 years?
Which brings us right back to our final question. That impulse to stop the skateboarder, it seems so simple, so caring on the surface, but this whole explainer, based on the author's work, suggests a much, much more complicated reality. When we try to create a world that's totally free of danger, we might be preventing the development of competence. And when that impulse gets mixed with resentment, we may be creating a world that's not just unchallenging, but actively hostile to that energetic, competitive, risk-taking spirit, a spirit that society desperately needs, especially from its young men.